Question. Rabbi, I would actually support what you said. I really like what you said about science being built on presupposition during your lecture. And I believe that that's quite true. And I also believe that's the grounds for certainty in knowledge. I have this odd epistemology that uh, every knowledge is built from presupposition. In science, it could be hypothesis, and in religion, is faith. Uh, when St. Paul said that faith is a gift, I believe that so much because apart from faith, whatever we hold on to in religion has no value. We can't rationally prove the existence of God completely. We can't rationally understand the inner workings of God. So within that grounds, I think both religion and science stand on presuppositions. And presupposition is not a weak ground for epistemology. It's not a weak ground because we are limited in knowledge, what we can know. So we have to build on presuppositions, whether it is faith in religion, whether it is hypothesis in science. So from that angle, I think whatever weakness scientific study of religion would accuse religion of, science itself has a share in such weakness in the epistemological frame of it. So in that case, is it fair enough for scienticism of today trying to invalidate religious knowledge and trying to enthrone scientific truth as the only truth? And especially in the public square, religion, there's an attempt to relegate religion to a private space. It has no place in the public space. Every other form of knowledge has a space in the public field, except religion. So is that fair enough on the grounds of science?
Emmanuel,
the way it relates to religion?
You're asking a lot of different questions. That's a totally different question. What should be and shouldn't be in the public square? That's a totally different question. You see, your original question had to do with the distinction between faith and reason.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And then you went on to that to indicate that there's no real way of proving either the actual truth of this faith when it comes to the idea of God and when it comes to what's going on in the world or the rationality for explaining the nature of the world. That was your second question. And then your third question had to do with the public square.
Yeah.
3 separate questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an intimidation of religion in the public square.
Yeah.
By science.
Now, look, let me try to deal with it in a way that is not going to take too much time. But your first question about faith and reason, I don't happen to agree with the idea that faith is a gift. I happen to believe that everybody, insofar as they live, actually live by faith. In what sense? I have a faith right now that my computer is not going to blow up and we can continue this conversation. I have a faith that the breakfast that I had this morning is not going to make me sick. I have a faith that when I go into the car and I go somewhere, that the tires are going to hold. Faith in that sense is trust. And we can't live without trust. I have faith, for example, that when I go into a restaurant, I trust them to feed me food and not poison. We can't live without that. See? Now, what Paul was getting at was something else. When he talked about the wisdom of this world is folly, right? And the folly of faith is wisdom. Well, I don't believe one can make that kind of a sharp and strong separation between faith and reason. That was the point that I tried to make in my talk. When, for example, on Judgment Day, God asks you, did you think logically? For the simple reason, and I'll get to the essence of it. And here you may disagree with me, Emmanuel, and I don't know how the rest of you, but the way I define theology is the meaning and truth of a particular faith perspective. Meaning requires reason. There's no way that you can talk about what does this mean unless I use reason to distinguish and delineate what it is that I mean. Without reason, I can't tell you what I mean. Without reason, I can't even understand what you mean, right? And truth. When I say that theology is concerned with the truth of one's perspective, and you have very significant and much wiser people than we are who seem to think that they had an angle on this question. Both Maimonides and Thomas Aquinas felt they were confident, and even Kant, with the practical argument, believed that you certainly can give very good reasons, perhaps not proofs, but convincing reasons for why God exists. I think all of these philosophers try to give convincing reasons as to not only why the world exists, but also to make sense of this world. I think Therese's question actually made that very, very clear. So I would not make this sharp separation between faith and reason. I think that reason requires faith, if only that reason has certain presuppositions, and the way I would say it is more in the sense of non-contradiction. For example, we can't talk unless we believe in the concepts of identity, non-contradiction. I know in the modern logic, keep in mind my first study at Tulane was in mathematical logic. I went to Tulane to study math. And there was some question of excluded middle. But certainly identity and non-contradiction, no one can deny that, because if you deny that, you have to keep quiet. You can't say anything. So here's my point. My point is that both science and religion, both reason and faith, have certain presuppositions which they share, and which you can't proceed unless you actually accept these presuppositions. Now, the question then becomes really, I think, what are the sources that we need to make sense of the world? And here, I don't think we can do without scientific sources and religious sources. That's why I think those people who try to reduce all questions to scientific questions, saying science can investigate everything, I think they don't, basically, because they don't even understand, as I tried to say in my talk, what are the presuppositions of science. You can't have science unless you accept that there's some pattern or order in the world. You have to accept certain basic postulates or categories that make actually the very possibility of the world in any way intelligible. So I don't see how you can do away with that. But similarly, I would say, you have to do the same thing with religion. You have to ask yourself, what am I presupposing when I say that I'm a religious person? And here, Emmanuel, I want to repeat what I've said in our classes. Let me do it for the benefit of this group. Whitehead said that there was a basic fallacy that we all engage in, and that was the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. What is that fallacy? It's where you take an abstraction and treat it as if it's something concrete. When we talk about religion, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the most primitive religion? Are we talking about the religion, for example, of the most primitive people? Are we talking about Thomas Aquinas? Are you talking about monotheistic religions as opposed to pagan religions? I mean, the word religion is too vague. When, where, who, and why? Same thing with science. What science are we talking about? Are we talking about the early science, for example, that you find as one reads in the pre-Socratics, which is beautiful? I mean, the best work that one can do is to study carefully the pre-Socratics. But it's a very, very different science than the science that you have today that is able to produce nuclear fission, etc. Now, as far as the public square is concerned, I'm not so sure that what you're saying is true in the sense that the public square doesn't allow religious expression and so forth. You have to say here again the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. I don't think there's any question that you have maximum religious expression in the United States. I don't think in the United States we have much limitations on religious. Now, there's more of a problem, for example, in a place like France, where laïcité, the whole concept, and it led to a lot of problems. For example, Macron's statement, which actually said silly things about Islam and made an enemy of Islam and made a saint of the person who unjustly and horribly was killed. I mean, look, I think that one should defend the right of free speech, but that right of free speech means that you have to use that free speech responsibly. And unless people know how to use that free speech responsibly, you're doing more harm than good. I recently came across something, and this will horrify all of you. It will absolutely horrify all of you. And I'm reluctant to even mention it. But there was a case that was discussed in medicine, where this woman decided because she had the right to have in vitro fertilization, she got pregnant. And because she had the right to have an abortion, when she got pregnant, she aborted it. Do you really believe that these rights are absolute? That someone can use these rights without responsibility? I mean, I find that incredible. And it seems to me that if someone is a teacher and teaching these things, they should be instructed on how to actually teach it in a way that doesn't provoke the worst. When you're ridiculing a religion, you're taking that which is most sacred, most holy, most important to that religion. And you have to be careful. Now, it's true that they may act in ways that are totally reprehensible from even the very teaching of that religion. You see? But I think that the public square, the practice of religion in public square is clear as long as it doesn't actually be a manifestation of a religion that is a facade and not really a religion.